Social Studies 8 group. How are you? Happy Monday. I hope you were able to do something fun this weekend. On Saturday, my husband and I took the kids out to Barnhart, and we went for a walk at the campground. That was really nice because there was no one there, so it was super easy to practice social distancing. The weather yesterday wasn't too great in the morning. I did get outside for a little bit to play with the dog. And then in the afternoon, just worked in my scrapbook room, my craft room, while Shay actually took a nap. It was a miracle. Anyway, moving on to social studies today, we are moving on to what was called the Roaring Twenties. We started on Thursday when we learned more about the Model T and the moving assembly line. That moving assembly line really opened up the door for a lot more materials to be mass produced or made in big bunches. So today I'm going to read a couple parts of an article, and then we'll read the rest of the article on Wednesday. So the Roaring Twenties were a period in history of dramatic social and political change. For the first time, more Americans lived in cities than on farms. The nation's total wealth more than doubled between 1920 and 1929, and this economic growth swept many Americans into an affluent but unfamiliar consumer society. People from coast to coast bought the same goods thanks to nationwide advertising and the spread of chain stores, listened to the same music, did the same dances, and even used the same slang. Many Americans were uncomfortable with this new, urban, sometimes racy mass culture. In fact, for many, even most people in the United States, the 1920s brought more conflict than celebration. However, for a small handful of young people in the nation's big cities, the 1920s were roaring indeed. Okay, so first topic is the new woman. The most familiar symbol of the Roaring Twenties is probably the flapper, a young woman with bobbed hair and short skirts who drank, smoked, and said what might be termed unladylike things. In reality, most young women in the 1920s did none of these things, though many did adopt a fashionable flapper wardrobe. But even those women who were not flappers gained some unprecedented freedoms. They could vote at last. The 19th Amendment to the Constitution had guaranteed that right in 1920. Millions of women worked in white-collar jobs, as stenographers, for example, and could afford to participate in the burgeoning consumer economy. The increased, new machines and technologies like the washing machine and the vacuum cleaner eliminated some of the drudgery of household work. Okay, so let's go down to the birth of mass culture. During the 1920s, many Americans had extra money to spend, and they spent it on consumer goods such as ready-to-wear clothes and home appliances like electric refrigerators. In particular, they bought radios. The first commercial radio station in the U.S., Pittsburgh's KDKA, hit the airwaves in 1920. 3 years later, there were more than 500 stations in the nation. By the end of the 1920s, there were radios in more than 12 million households. People also went to the movies. Historians estimate that by the end of the decades, 3/4 of the American population visited a movie theater every week. But the most important consumer product of the 1920s was the automobile. Low prices. The Ford Model T cost just $260 in 1924, and generous credit made cars affordable luxuries in the beginning of the decade. By the end, they were practically necessities. In 1929, there was one car on the road for every 5 Americans. Meanwhile, an economy of automobiles was born. Businesses like service stations and motels sprang up to meet drivers' needs. The Jazz Age. Cars also gave young people the freedom to go where they pleased and do what they wanted. What many young people wanted to do was dance. The Charleston, the Cakewalk, the Black Bottom, the Flea Hop. Jazz bands played at dance halls like the Savoy in New York City and the Aragon in Chicago. Radio stations and phonograph records, 100 million of which were sold in 1927 alone, carried their tunes to listeners across the nation. Some older people objected to jazz music's vulgarity and depravity, but many in the younger generation loved the freedom they felt on the dance floor. The novels of F. Scott Fitzgerald chronicled the Jazz Age. Okay, so there's also a video that talks a little bit about flappers and some Jazz Age music to listen to. After you have done that, there is a Google form to fill out with some questions. I have tried making it super easy. I've matched the question to where you'll find the answer. Other than that, if you need anything, let me know. I will be back tomorrow with a review, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.